Great. I think we can get started. So, if we want to move to the next slide, as I was saying, this is a webinar where we've invited ScholarRock to come on and give us an update on their specific program. This is actually following on from a webinar that we did earlier this year, talking about the next stages that we're going to be moving into as clinical trials end. We get positive results, and then we start to move through the stages that hopefully will lead to access. And in particular, here with ScholarRock, it's going to focus now on their particular program. And the stage of that program as we do now start to get into these regulatory next stages. One of the things that I wanted to reiterate, highlight here, and I've got a few slides that are going to remind on a couple of issues that we did talk about earlier. But one key thing that I wanted to highlight is the stage that we're in now, getting ready for regulatory filings, regulatory approval. There are a lot of rules and regulations. And in this kind of compliance stage, there are a lot of things that actually can't be talked about. So questions sometimes are not going to be able to be answered. There's a lot of information about labels and things like that and costs that can't be promised, can't even be speculated about. So just that as an item, that there are things that are very controlled by these regulations. We do have some more information that we've had available, though, related to community statements and data. And we'll show a slide at the end that has links to those additional resources with some more information as well. I also wanted to highlight that even though we're getting to this stage now, very close to regulatory filings, and as we look next year, hopefully to approval and access, there's still a lot of unknowns, that we do have a lot of stages that we have to go through. Nothing yet is guaranteed. There's still possibilities where things won't play out. And as I was saying at the start as well, there's unknowns as well where we can't really talk about them yet, but we don't know if we'll get approval, what the label might be, the breadth of that approval. The final item on this kind of summary slide is also that we will have a lot of work ahead of us. This is an exciting time. We're seeing positive results come out. There is a lot of work to do to move from final stages of clinical trials and good results through regulatory stages, then working with payers, working with HCPs. And there's a lot of work that ScholarRock is going to be doing, but also we as a community have a very important role here with all of these groups to make sure that we get approvals and we get good access afterwards as well. So a lot of work for us to do in the year ahead, both with these groups that we're going to talk about at the national level, but also local advocacy as we get through to approvals and access. Local advocacy at the state level becomes very important as well. Mm-hmm. So I'll go through these next slides pretty quickly. They are reminders of things that we've had before, just to tee up then this specific webinar that we've got with ScholarRock. We've had a lot of changes over the last 7 years, a lot of positive changes for the community as we had our first treatments, disease-modifying therapies get approved, and we rolled those out and getting to good access as well, where about 70% of everybody in the US now has access to one of these disease-modifying genetic-based therapies. We're at a point where we still have 30% about in the US of people that are untreated. And while we've seen really good results from these first treatments, there's unmet needs. They don't answer everything that we're looking for. And we're going through these stages where we're hopefully stopping the disease, looking to kind of slow it down, stop it in place. But we're also focused on what can we do beyond that. Unmet needs, especially for people who got onto treatment that had symptoms already in place. How do we potentially build back strength and function? And we focus on the symptoms a little bit more as well. If we go to the next slide. We here are focused on one particular program in our drug pipeline. We have the 3 approved therapies that I was talking about there that have got rolled out. And now we're going to focus on the program here that is just finished clinical trials, got some good results coming out, and now it's getting ready for the stage of regulatory filing. This line just to the right on this slide here, NDA, BLA, as this program with ScholarRock, which is the second one down in the orange, now gets to that regulatory filing, and next year we'll work through, if the approval comes, how that actually then gets rolled out to patients as well. If we go to the next slide. Talking here a little bit about the stages that we're going to have to work through next year. There's We're going to be a very busy period of time as well. We're looking here and we're going to talk about one of the first opportunities that we've got for a real combination treatment that is looking to build on top of the genetic therapies with a muscle focused therapy, the anti-myostatin that we've got here, that Scholar Rock is going to talk about. We also have potential improvements at the same time to our existing genetic therapies. And all of these we're going to have to focus on as they potentially move through these stages with regulatory and then access afterwards as well. So bit of a reiteration here as well about this is going to be a very busy, important time for us as we get these next treatment breakthroughs. And it's probably going to be busier than we've ever been as a community in the past, where we had one particular treatment that was rolling out at a time. It's going to be a very busy time for us as we get into 2025. If we go to the next slide. The stage that we're at, we're prepping for ones that come afterwards as well, but we're at this key stage of working first and focusing first on the FDA. This is the critical part where we definitely look ahead to payers, working with our HCPs, treatment sites as well, but really important to make sure that a lot of effort goes into the regulatory filing, working with the FDA. Scholar Rock takes on this role of making sure that all of that good information from the clinical trials goes in. But we also have a role as a community to provide the FDA with what they need from the patient side, patient data, the patient voice as well, which really helps the FDA understand what the unmet needs are. So we're getting to that stage, the regulatory filing, and again, a key role for us in the community to support work in partnership with Scholar Rock as well as those filings go through. If we go to the next slide. This is something which a lot of you in the community have already been part of, being part of our community surveys, helping us with information, stories, and anecdotes of your daily life that you've given to us over the years, this year as well, very recently. And we have already communicated a lot of that to the FDA. We're planning another outreach from us as the community right at the start of 25, January or February, where we'll give them the latest information that we got from all of you in the community, your data, but again, making sure that it's real for the FDA as well. They understand the current situation. They understand what it is that you're all looking for potentially in the future. Again, what could help you in your daily lives, unmet needs that you've got as well, and make sure that the FDA understands all of that. The next slide. After the FDA, we don't get too far ahead of ourselves, but we do have to prep for this and make sure once we hopefully do get approval, the two other big groups that are involved here are ready. They understand, they have the capacity also to deliver these therapies in the real world setting. One is with healthcare providers, treatment sites, but also prescribing physicians. We have them, they're up to date, they understand the situation, they've got the capacity to be able to deliver these treatments once they get approved. So that's something we're preparing for, and then that will get ramped up next year as well. And then the final group, regulated HCPs, but then the final group that we focused on the next slide is the payers, the insurers that have the coverage. That is also a group that we have already done some work with, preparing this group for what could be coming next, understanding the current situation and the unmet needs. We'll also do another outreach to all of the payer contacts that we have early next year. And then this is certainly one that could, along with HCPs and local hospitals, become a key activity area in the community for local advocacy in 2025. Go to the next slide. And this is where I would actually like to hand off and hand it off to Mohammed from Scholar Rock, who is going to give some updates from their side on Scholar Rock, but also the program and the next stages that we're looking forward to. Mohammed?
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Kenneth. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Mohammed Guy, as Kenneth mentioned. I help lead the medical affairs team at Scholar Rock, and I'm really happy to be connecting with you today. Thank you to QSMA for this opportunity, and I see that we have over 160 people online, so welcome all. I'm really looking forward to sharing more about my company, Scholar Rock, and discussing the recent positive results, phase 3 data of apitegromab, a selective anti-myostatin antibody being studied in SMA. Next slide. Before I get into it, I just wanted to share a quick disclaimer. This presentation includes information about an investigational product not approved by the FDA, the EMA, or any other regulatory health authorities. As such, apitegromab is still an investigational fully monoclonal antibody, has not been approved for the use or indication discussed here. And therefore, there is no guarantee it will be approved for such uses or indications. While we are working with urgency to share our data with the relevant regulatory agency, We ask that you understand at this stage of the process, there are certain questions we are unable to answer. We are grateful for the interest and support of the Cure SMA community and are committed to sharing updates as soon as we have more information. As a reminder, providing this information does not constitute any recommendation for use. Next slide. For the next 20 or so minutes, before we really dive in, I wanted to take a moment to review what you can expect to hear from me today. First, I'll share more detail about Scholar Rock, who we are and our commitment to SMA, as well as relevant background information about the science and our therapeutic approach in SMA. Then I'm pleased to provide an update on our SMA clinical development program and share some information on the next step following our phase 3 Sapphire study. And then lastly, there will be time at the end to address some of the questions that you all have submitted from the SMA community. Next slide. Who is Scholar Rock? For those of you who have not heard of Scholar Rock, we are a biopharmaceutical company based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And for over a decade, we have been working to accelerate new breakthrough in SMA. Since our very beginning, we have been dedicated to our mission to discover, develop, and deliver therapies that create new possibilities for patients. We combine bold science with a deep commitment to our goals of making a meaningful difference for patients living with serious diseases like SMA. Our investigational therapies harness a breakthrough science approach to selectively targeting a class of protein in a very unique way. These proteins, called growth factor, control a range of biological functions. Our main approach really aims to selectively target protein growth factors before they are activated. So think about it. It's almost like shutting off the water supply before a faucet starts leaking. Next slide. How have we been engaging with the SMA community? Thanks to you, the perspectives of the SMA community have been ingrained in all of our efforts since the earliest days of our company. We have partnered closely with Cure SMA to inform and align our research and development efforts. And we've engaged with the community through discrete milestones, events, and collaborations. For example, Scholar Rock is a proud member of the Cure SMA Industry Collaborative and has been a regular sponsor of the annual Cure SMA conference, where we've hosted information sessions, we presented some research update, and we met with individuals and families across the SMA community to hear your perspectives directly. We also support and participate in events including Summit of Strengths, the Cure SMA Gala of Hope, and Hope of the Hill, which I attended last month in Washington, D.C. Building off what we've heard from the community, earlier this year, we launched an independent educational campaign about SMA and the role of muscle function called Life Takes Muscle. In the context of where we're here today to discuss, we are especially grateful of Cure SMA's assistance with trial recruitment for our phase 2 and phase 3 trial of apitegromab for SMA. We remain very thankful for your ongoing partnership and look forward to continuing our collaboration as we look into the future. Next slide. What we've discovered is progressive muscle weakness remains an unmet need in SMA. In the time we have spent learning from the SMA community, we've heard clearly the importance of gains in muscle strength and function, both of which are critical to maintaining independence. We understand that muscle is a critical and may seem like minimal gains in strength translate to exponential gains in function. We recognize the importance of daily activities such as feeding oneself, rolling over in bed, lifting a water bottle, or having the energy to do any of these activities and more on a daily basis. Next slide. We are committed of creating possibilities for patients. The perspectives shared with us by the SMA community members have been incredibly compelling and valuable. I wanted to just take a minute to share with you one of those perspectives we heard from an individual living with SMA who has attended this year in June, the Cure SMA annual conference in Austin, Texas. If you could please play the video.
With a progressive disease, I think it's always tough because you figure out how to do something, and then a year goes by and and now I'm having problems. So for example, my latest challenge is it's getting harder for me to get up out of my bed. each day. Then you have to ask yourself the question, is this my new normal, or am I just tired today? I'm still completely independent, live on my own. I'm able to do everything I need to on my own. But I'm right on that nice edge where if I lose just a little bit more functionality, that I could go from being completely independent to completely dependent. For those of us with SMA, any little difference, positive or negative, can make a huge difference in your life.
This gentleman, Doug, and so many other members of the community have been our inspiration for our muscle-targeted approach. With that, let's take a closer look at the biology of muscle function in SMA. If you could go please to the next slide. Motor neuron losses and muscle atrophy, we've seen that lead to progressive muscle weakness. As you know, SMA is a progressive disease that causes motor neuron loss and muscle atrophy. This leads to progressive muscle weakness. Motor neurons are nerve cells that connect to and communicate with skeletal muscles, letting them know when to contract. Current SMA treatment have had a tremendous impact on the life of patients living with SMA, but individuals still lose function over time on these chronic standard of care therapies. That's because SMA therapies slow down degeneration of motor neurons, but they do not directly address muscle atrophy. There is still an unmet need to address the progressive muscle atrophy and the associated weakness caused by SMA. So now, in the next slide, let's turn to look at Scholar Rock has been working to potentially address this challenge. Myostatin is a protein that regulates muscle growth. Scholar Rock's approach to SMA focuses on myostatin, a protein that every person has in their body, including those living with SMA. Myostatin regulates the breakdown of muscle as part of a natural system that regulates muscle growth. Preventing the activation of myostatin reduces this breakdown and can increase the size of skeletal muscle throughout the body. Next slide. Scholar Rock has progressively advanced an approach of selective muscle targeting based on deep insights on how skeletal muscle is regulated. Reducing myostatin activation, on top of addressing, obviously, the motor neuron deficiency, may be an approach that leads to improved motor function in those living with SMA. This is the approach used by apitegromab, which, as depicted here, selectively binds to and inhibits the activation of myostatin. Next slide. What we've seen is that the natural history of survival motor neurons therapies has shifted a bit. New approaches to addressing muscle weaknesses, such as our anti-myostatin approach, are important because we've seen that this patient may still experience decline in motor function after a period of time on current treatments. This was recently illustrated in a clinical research poster presented at the June Cure SMA conference. The graph showed that those receiving chronic treatment of SMA therapies were observed to lose about 1 point per year on the Hammersmith Functional Motor Scale after being on treatment for about 4 or 5 years. You can see a nice growth, then it seems to plateau, and then you start seeing some of that decline. This phenomenon informed the selection of the patient for the Sapphire trial, which we'll dive into the next slide. Next slide, please. So we recently concluded our phase 3 Sapphire trial for apitegromab. We designed and conducted this trial comparing apitegromab to placebo in individuals living with SMA who were on chronic background SMN therapies. Study participants were randomized to receive either apitegromab or placebo. Remember, this is on background SMN therapies. And the trial enrolled 188 patients. The trial included 2 age groups, the 2 to 12 main efficacy population and the 13 to 21 age group. The primary endpoint for both groups was change in HMFSC score at 52 weeks. Sapphire was also informed by more than 4 years of treatment with apitegromab through our phase 2 TOPAZ study, which also reinforced the safety profile of apitegromab. In the next slide, let's look at the trial results. The phase 3 Sapphire clinical study achieved positive results, meeting its primary efficacy endpoints in the 2 to 12 main efficacy population with a statistically significant and clinically meaningful 1.8 point improvement as measured by HMFSC at 52 weeks. Nearly all participants in the Sapphire trial, 98%, opted to enroll in our Onyx long-term extension study, where they will continue to receive apitegromab. We are really grateful to the patients, families, investigators who participated in the Sapphire study, and to all of those who contributed to our positive phase 3 trial. We are working with urgency right now to bring our investigational treatment to the broader SMA community, and will continue to communicate program updates through our official channels. Lastly, as Kenneth mentioned already, for those of you who are interested in viewing the full top-line data finding, please refer to our community statements already distributed by Cure SMA, and I think we'll have a link of it in one of the later slides. Next slide. As I mentioned before, for over a decade, we've been working very hard to accelerate new breakthrough in SMA. Now, having conducted over 4 years of clinical studies in individuals living with SMA, we found that it is very clear that there is still a significant unmet need for therapies that go beyond the standard of care that we have today, and addressing muscle atrophy and the loss of motor function caused by SMA. We have more than 4 years, 4+ years of data from our TOPAZ trial that have informed the safety profile of apitegromab. And the recent positive top-line results from our phase 3 Sapphire trial give us the opportunity to continue working to bring these new potential treatment options to the SMA community. So what's next? Go to the next slide, please. We are moving as quickly as possible to share our phase 3 data with regulatory agencies. Our ultimate goal is to work collaboratively with the SMA community to deliver a muscle-targeted treatment for patients and people living with SMA. If apitegromab is approved, we anticipate a US commercial launch somewhere around Q4 of 2025. Next slide. We also plan to submit the Sapphire data for publication in a peer-reviewed journal and present the data at a medical conference in 2025. Timing, of course, is contingent on the abstract and manuscript being accepted, so we don't have specific dates to share at this time. But as soon as we have more information, we'll make sure that we'll disseminate that. Going forward, we will continue to treat patients who participated in both the phase 2, which is the TOPAZ, and phase 3, the Sapphire trial, through our ongoing Onyx long-term extension study. Also, we plan to initiate the OPAL trial to evaluate apitegromab in children under the age of 2 years of age in mid-2025. And we will continue to share program updates as this trial advances. At this point, I'll turn it over to Kenneth to go over some of the questions that have been submitted.
Thank you. And if we go to the next slide after this, we got quite a lot of questions that were submitted in advance, and we provided all of those to ScholarRock. What we try to focus on here are, I think, about 5 questions which represented some general themes that we saw come through. And so I'll read these off. And then, Mohammed, if you want to kind of take these. So one question that came in from the community, and again, a lot of people are asking in this general area as well, is looking at the question of how is apitegromab administered and how often?
Yeah, so patients who participated in the Sapphire trial receive apitegromab via IV infusion every 4 weeks at designated infusion treatment centers. As we continue to work with urgency to seek regulatory approval to bring apitegromab to the SMA community, we are really committed to ensuring an optimal treatment experience for patients. As I mentioned before, apitegromab is still an investigational drug candidate under evaluation. As we receive more guidance from the regulatory agencies, we will share further update as we are able to do so.
Go to the next slide. Another area that people were interested in, and you touched on it a little bit, the plans following the current clinical trials. And so one specifically that came in, what is the long-term follow-up plan for Sapphire for that clinical trial?
Yeah. So both patients that participated in the TOPAZ, which was the phase 2, and Sapphire, which is the phase 3 trial, have the option to enroll in the Onyx open label extension study. And this will look at the long-term safety and efficacy of apitegromab. We are really proud to say that almost all patients from both the phase 2 and phase 3, over 98%, for instance, of participants in the Sapphire trials have rolled over to the Onyx study, where we'll continue to receive apitegromab.
And then the next slide. You were talking about submitting the data to the FDA, but also looking to present and publish at some point as well at conferences, and we'll hopefully get those available and give them to the community as well. Here, asking though a question about do you have plans to present data according to subgroups? Here, I think looking at kind of the different types of previous treatments that people have. Do you have plans to present that data?
Yeah, so Scholar Rock plans to submit the full data set of Sapphire for publication in a peer-reviewed journal. And we also hope to present that data at a medical conference in 2025. Timing, of course, is contingent on the abstract and manuscript being accepted. So we don't have any specific dates right now, but we are working internally very hard to submit that information so it can get published.
And the next question, and obviously the theme here as well, looking at the combination approach here, this is kind of the base. This is a combination on top of the disease modifying treatments. That's what the DMT here, I think, is standing for. So a question here and I'm teeing this up a little bit, obviously the data that you got from the clinical trials, which doesn't give you all the information. We're going to see more as this hopefully gets approved into a real world setting. Here, asking for what you might know right now from the clinical trial data. At what age do patients benefit more from this approach in combination with disease modifying treatments, DMTs?
Yeah, so if you look at the Sapphire trial, we've enrolled patients from the age of 2 all the way to 21, right? As I mentioned, we are really working right now to get all the data points submitted to our journal for publication. Once it gets published, you'll get more data. However, with trials like these, when you have small patient population and small cohorts, it's hard to make a definitive answer. However, because of the mechanism of action of the drug, we believe that all the patients that were in our trial could benefit from this combination of DMTs with the motor neuron.
And the next slide for the last question that we have, and you did touch on this, but we did get a lot of questions with this general theme, so it might be good to go over this again. Specific question asking, what are plans for next steps in the clinical development pipeline?
Yeah, so I've mentioned this briefly. As I mentioned again, let me reiterate it. We will submit the full data set for publication at a peer-reviewed journal, and we are hoping also to present this at a conference, a medical conference sometime in 2025. But we are also starting in mid-2025 a new trial called the OPAL trial that is to evaluate apitegromab in SMA with patients under the age of 2. So we will continue to communicate program updates through our official channels and ask that you visit our website, scholarrock.com, to learn more.
Go to the next slide, which I think might have some of that information as well, where to go for more details.
Yeah. So I would like to conclude by expressing gratitude again to the patients, families, and investigators who participated in the Sapphire trial and to all who contributed to this research achievement. We will continue to be motivated daily by the SMA community, and we are committed to working together and doing our utmost to accelerate new breakthrough. So thank you all for your time and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you. And the last slide, I think we just wanted to reiterate something we've talked about here throughout, that we do have some more information that's available, more resources and information that's come out already on the Cure SMA site. So we have these links here, community statement, press releases, and as more data becomes public, we'll certainly make sure that they're available. So we will look to actually share the slides from this deck as well, so people don't have to worry about copying these links down. We will be sharing the slides. You'll be able to get the links that you can actually click on after this webinar. But we have more information that's available for people that want it right now on the Cure SMA site. And again, as we move into next year, this will be built upon as information comes out. And our usual plan as well is at a certain point, as we get close to hopefully approval, we'll look to have a dedicated page that really has kind of all of the information that is available on this potential treatment, available in one place, one web page on our website with this and more information and more resources as well. So we look forward to more information coming out, getting it posted on our website, sharing it with the community as well. And so maybe a last item. Thank you, Mohammed, the Scholar Rock, coming on today, presenting this information, as you're saying as well. Thank you to the community being part of the trials that you've had. And from our side, to the community as well, thank him for the information, the data, the voices that we're also contributing to regulators and the other groups with, again, the needs, what's going on in the community, making sure that we're sharing data, but also what's happening in people's daily lives. And so many people in the community have been involved in that so far and will be next year as well. So thank you, Mohammed, and thank you for everybody joining us today on the webinar.
Thank you all.